Good evening, everybody, and welcome once again to Story Hour. I'm your host, Daniel Marcus. My unparalleled co-host is Laura Blackwell, and I hope that you are all, she's being unparalleled, awesome. I hope you're all healthy and safe and taking care of yourselves and each other. I started Story Hour in the early days of the pandemic back in early 2000 during lockdown, and my intention at the time was just to create a little space for myself and my writer friends to share work with each other. It's really sort of a small scale community building exercise. And it just grew. And we've been going strong since then. 2.5 years, every week in and week out, two authors, some of them returning, some of them just visiting us once, but always interesting and entertaining. And really, we embrace the huge, broad, wide tent that is speculative fiction. So a wide range of subgenres and styles and voices, and all of that. The idea, the way this works is we invoke a time-honored and ancient form of entertainment, which is folks sitting around the fire telling lies to each other. And every week, two authors, about 30 minutes each, we do exactly that. Tonight, we are really happy to have Xan van Rooyen and Can Wiggins, and both are Story Hour returning visitors, or repeat offenders, as we like to call them. So welcome, both of you, and thanks so much for joining us again. We're really happy to see you. It's our custom to ask authors to indicate a worthy cause for us to call your attention to. And if you're fortunate enough to be in a position to be able to help to do that, otherwise, just be aware and spread the word. So Xan is reading tonight for the Trevor Project. That's the trevorproject.org, which provides information and support to LGBTQ young people 24/7 all year round. At the Trevor Project, folks can reach out to a counselor if they're struggling, find answers and information, and also get the tools that you might need to help someone else. So that's the trevorproject.org. Can is reading tonight, and we actually didn't plan Xan and Can, it just is serendipitous, right? Can is reading tonight for the National Multiple Sclerosis Society. That's nationalmssociety.org. The National MS Society helps each person afflicted by MS to address the challenges of living with MS. They help by raising funds for cutting-edge research, driving change through advocacy, facilitating professional education, and providing programs and services that empower people with MS and their families to move their lives forward. So that's nationalmssociety.org. And we are going to open the program tonight with Xan van Rooyen, climber, tattoo enthusiast, peanut butter addict, and loyal Shiba minion. Xan van Rooyen is a non-binary storyteller from South Africa, currently living in Finland, where the heavy metal is soothing and the cold, dark forests are inspiring. Xan has a master's in music, and when not teaching, enjoys conjuring strange worlds and creating quirky characters. You can find Xan's short stories in the likes of Three Load Burning Eye. What a great name for a venue. Daily Science Fiction, Apparition Lit, and The Colored Lens. Xan hangs out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, so feel free to say hi over there. And Xan first appeared at Story Hour in April of this year. So welcome back.
Thank you so much.
Yours.
Right, I'm going to be reading a story called Shatterling, which was first published by Bards and Sages Quarterly. And I do apologize, I have a slight cold, so I hope that my voice doesn't sound too bad. The story that I'm reading is about loss and death, and it does mention child death. So for anybody who is sensitive to that, might want to skip this story. So here we go. Shatterling. There were many words for the life battered. Shatterling, splinter soul, hollow head. Sometimes the shattering happened in a single hammer strike. Sometimes it was an accumulation of little hurts, a slow chiseling and inexorable excoriation. It didn't matter what left a soul in splinters or how the damage had been inflicted. The result was the same. Sam hadn't even noticed at first, shrugging off the small wounds, thinking they'd heal. but the sloughing had continued, peeling away layers until he'd been left only with scabs where once there'd been skin. Then, when he thought he'd never have to endure another hurt, there'd been the loss like an asteroid impact, pulverizing his already friable heart. For years, Sam could barely breathe, every gasp a hurricane blasting through the hollow behind his ribs, every memory a giant's fist pummeling his gut as he'd searched for the missing pieces of self, for meaning in the unfairness. But no matter how many shards he found, the void remained. Sam slipped a hand beneath his shirt and pressed his fingers to the acid-etched wound wrapped tight by ratty bandages. The cloth was wet, the chasm still leaking. If only he could find a sliver, the skinniest remnant of his fractured heart. Which was why Sam had hitched a ride in the swampy embrace of a timid dorpy or stilt and shack. It seeped across the stretching felt, brackish water sloshing apologetically over its undulating margins, hemmed by trailing cypress and tangled sedge. When Elephant rose above the horizon, its vast trunk of stars pointing due north, the wandering towns of Greater Feltham would gather at the Grand Junction for ceremonials of loss and longing. They came limping and trundling, lurching beneath the weight of their occupants. Hunched beasts they were, all cracked masonry, warped shingles, and crumbling cobbles. They were scarred, licked black by flame or curdled with mildew. Like so many of their inhabitants, the towns, from largest stut to tiniest dorpy, were shattered and shedding splinters. Perched on a creaky gangway strung precariously between teetering hovels, Sam eyed the boggy ground below and the parched savannah beyond. Salt flies flocked in hazy murmurations, soaring across the heat-smudged sky, their dance accompanied by screaming cicadas. Twilight slunk closer as the dorpy dribbled north. The breeze cooled the sweat on Sam's neck and ruffled his hair, the blue strands, shard-matted, chiming against his ears. He quietened his bangs, but the shards bit and slashed at his fingers. They'd tolerate touch only from their rightful owners. There'd be others like Sam at the junction, Shatterlings searching for the lost pieces of themselves, Shatterlings trading in soul shards in the hopes of one day becoming whole again, Shatterlings as eroded as the towns and the land broiled by the sun. Radiation had flayed the rind off the world as surely as Sam's loss had flayed flesh from bone. He shifted on the gangway, ignoring the mosquitoes swarming from the murk below. The mozzies whined a counter-melody to the shard song in Sam's ears, but kept their distance. The bloodsuckers were impartial to Shatterlings, their veins laced with ash and bitterness. Most people avoided Sam too, as if sadness were contagious. Perhaps it was. The sun writhed in death throes, splattering the clouds orange and purple. Night closed its fist on the felt, stars spurting between its clenched fingers, and Sam traced the constellations with his gaze, remembering the boy he taught him the shape of these stars and how to write love and kisses on bare skin. The memories were talons tearing away scabs to renew the wound. Sam focused on the heavens, following the arc of Elephant's trunk as it curled above the horizon. There was oryx and baboon, warthog, caracal, and aardwolf. The last was a constant companion, visible across all of Greater Feltham, rising early and stretching its sloped shoulders across the sky. Sam offered up a prayer to the creature, a prayer as rancid as the blood caked beneath his nails. Ina had left pieces of herself in the walls, a childhood in flaked paint and seeping stains, turning once white ceilings brown and green in all the shades of pain. She'd bled on the floor and in the bed, through menses, then childbirth and almost death. Ina stood in the ruins of the house now, a dilapidated estate cowering in the shadow of the Dragonsberg, destroyed by a hurtling town or collapsed beneath the ache of being abandoned. Loneliness congealed in the corners and slow dripped from drooping eaves. In the distance, mist clung to the snow-capped flanks of scree, thick with ghosts and whispers. Tendrils and voices drifted down the mountain, blanketing the valley in a thrumming susurrus. The house answered in a creaking chorus of misery. Ina picked her way through the rubble, ignoring the echoes of her own voice trapped in the wraith-fuzzed air. The walls had crumbled, the foundations cracked, root-wrenched and vermin-gutted. The shards she'd buried in the forever of brick and mortar were scattered now, dandelion seeds torn away in a gale. Memories, a life's detritus, tossed across the veldt. The parts of herself she'd buried and hidden, the ones she'd trusted to stone for safekeeping, were all gone. She thought the house would weather the storms of time and change, chained static to the bedrock of the earth while all around it shifted and fled. Some pieces she thought she'd be better off without. She could forget the shape of them. She might mitigate the damage. She'd stitched her wounds with denial, and they'd scabbed but never scarred, the emptiness separating through frayed edges. Now, she wanted those pieces. She needed to feel every jagged edge of herself, to be whole if only for a moment. But only the carcass of the house remained, the facade garroted by thorny creeper, its bones bleached and weathered in jumbled piles beneath a canopy of spreading foliage. And there, in this graveyard of nostalgia, a glinting. Ina struggled to her knees, every joint protesting as she rifled through dirt and deadfall. A shard, bright and pulsing. It sang off key, the tune familiar but not quite right. It didn't belong to her, this lonely scrap. But it was warm in her regret-bottled hands even as it stung her fingers. It whispered, and she recognized its cry, the shape of it fitting her own hollow. Even if it snagged on her lungs, throbbed behind her ribs, or made her insides bleed, slow and deadly, she would make the shard fill the emptiness. For a little while, she'd be complete. Ina rose, turning to the north. Soon the towns would gather, and others like her would seek all they'd lost. She'd never attended a junction before, too afraid she wouldn't find what she was looking for, even more afraid that she would. But now the house was as tumble down as she, pitted and frail. Staggering on tired feet, cane tapping against the dry earth, Ina forged a path across the veldt, following the swooping tail of aardwolf and billowing ears of elephant, the stars her guide. The towns came together in thunder and squeal, kicking up plumes of dry earth and spawning dust devils in their wake. Sam's swampy ride splashed into place between a motley huddle of lesser dorps. People waved and bowed, gestured with hands and flung greetings in words or song across ramshackle borders in a dozen different languages. Eventually, the jostling towns settled. Shatterlings were common at junctions, but not always welcome. Too much a reminder of the minor soul injuries others had sustained and survived, of the brokenness others carried and did better to hide or ignore. Brittle and prone to smithereening beneath an angry fist or cruel smile, Shatterlings also made soft targets for those who took delight in destruction. Sam pulled up his hood, quieting the chimes of his hair, and threaded through the tapestry of streets. As usual, the towns had converged on the banks of the Grootslang, where the snaking froth of brown water was widest. The great river had once flowed in a circle all around Greater Veldum, an Ouroboros corralling the itinerant habitats lest they wander beyond the brink. A vast ring interrupted only by the sea where the Grootslang splayed briefly into flay. Now, it barely flowed in some places, a mere nosebleed trickle. But here at least the water was broad, if not deep, the churn punctuated by reeds and whispering papyrus. Heading upriver, Sam jumped and climbed, swinging and darting through the crowds. His skin prickled with drying sweat and anticipation. A dozen different songs echoed in his ears, shards calling, wailing, each voice unique in the tumult, but none quite right. None were his. A person, shorter and darker-skinned, blocked his path. Arms folded, brows furrowed, mouth a thin twist. They spoke, repeating themselves in several languages before Sam nodded in understanding. "I can hear it," they said. "Oh, one of yours?" he replied in the same tongue, the syllables thick and awkward against his lips. "Obviously." They didn't look like a Shatterling, but Sam knew better than to judge. The worst damage was usually where you couldn't see it. They ducked down a narrow staircase, the wood barnacled and salt-gnawed. A seaside dorp, this. Sam could taste it, could hear the echoing crash and roar of waves trapped in the sea glass dangling from crusted eaves. The person stopped, the shells knotted in their locks tinkling as they turned. "Show me." Slowly, Sam peeled back his hood and shook out his hair. The Shatterling gaped, black eyes wide, teeth clenched as they backed away. Fear curled off their shoulders in wisps of white, tinged with disgust as they stared at Sam's face. He was used to it. Recovering, they raised a shaky finger. "It's that one." They pointed above Sam's right ear. Slowly, he reached for the shard and closed his fingers around its stinging form. Emanating memory wrapped bluebottle fronds around his wrist as Sam tugged it free from the tangles of his curls. "Give it to me. It's mine," the Shatterling said. Sam studied the shard in his hand, red and glossy and full of anger, blistering his palm. Then he drew the mallet from the pocket of his coat. What are you doing?" Eyes wet, face scrunched. Sam flattened his hand against the nearest salt-speckled wall, his elbow knocking a chorus from driftwood chimes. He smashed the mallet against the back of his hand, hitting true between old scabs and bruises. The shard disintegrated. Fingers tore at his coat, at his limbs, a voice tear-garbled and pain-stammered, begging him not to do what was already done. Xan raised the mallet again, until the memories loosed their grip on his wrist, until glitter dust was all that remained. The weeping Shatterling slumped against the wall, fingers catching at the pieces already disappearing on the wind. Sam could see it now, the cracks and hollows eating through their skin, a web of loss and damage cutting shallow down their neck to slither beneath the collar of their shirt. Why? They asked, all breath and quiver. The answer was there, boiling in his chest, raking through sinew and fizzing in vain, but he owed this sea stray nothing. Instead, Sam tucked the bloody mallet back into his pocket and pulled up his hood. He would almost miss it, the warmth of that borrowed rage tingling across his skull, the righteous fury pouring heat down his spine. But there was delight in destruction, too. Sam left the Shatterling crumpled in grief against the wall, the shards in his hair jangling a dissonant counterpoint to the driftwood chimes still humming their shanty tunes. Sam passed through the clamour, fingers trailing along the painted walls of a door splashed in geometric patterns or blinding bright colour. He regarded the river to the east, the surface broken by the lurking heads of crocodiles and yawning hippopotami. Imagining the viscous water closing over his head, the tug and roll of a crocodile's death spin, made Sam smile. Drowning, in one final gulp, couldn't hurt more than drowning sip by slow-burning sip each and every day. He forced his feet to continue their trek through the jumbled middle, where numerous towns met in a market sprawl. Handcrafts gave way to harvest produce, skeins of silk and spooling beside tables laden with bowls of spice. Chili caught sharp at the back of Sam's throat, and cinnamon made him sneeze. Vendors offered fragrant poikikors from bubbly cauldrons, and Sam palmed a couple of skillpikeys from a tray and stuffed the crisp liver balls into his mouth in an explosion of iron and greasy fat. Mouth full, yet soul yearning, Sam escaped the furore. He listened, muscles taut and ears strained. 100 different voices, 1,000 varied sounds. None the one he needed. On he traipsed, away from the market and into a quieter maze of narrow streets where towns had melded in coital caresses, in a desperate clash of mud brick and wood, of straw and concrete as every stut and dorp tried to reclaim the missing pieces of themselves, tearing fragments from one another. Staircases loomed, leading to empty landings. Doors warped and shuddered as the towns amalgamated and separated, windows opening onto scenery from distant corners of the velddom. Here, snow wafted through a broken pane, bringing with it a gout of mountain air. Sam paused at another, peering through grimy glass across an arid expanse, the horizon impaled by quiver trees. Each spiky limb was a lancing reminder of the distance between him and home, between what he'd had and what he'd lost. He could taste the desert and feel the heat, the boy's fingers in his hair and down his spine. His waking smile, soft and secret, had become a sickle blade threshing memory. Sam groaned and clutched at his chest, blood soaking through the bandages. From an alley further east, a single voice called out through the static. A shard song, unmistakable and so very close. Leaving burgundy fingerprints on the glass, Sam turned toward the sound, spine rigid and cold sweat beading his skin. He followed his feet, reeled in by the voice whispering, shouting, screaming his name. Ina sipped her tea, rooibos flavored with honey and hibiscus. It warmed her, trickling comfort through her withered bones. Here in a shaded courtyard, listening to the hushed conversations of the few other patrons, lulled by the chattering of grey lories in the syringa boughs above her, here she could almost believe she was whole. If it weren't for the gangrenous threads lacing the backs of her hands, radiating outwards from the shard she'd forced into the cavity of her chest. As if sensing her attention, the shard gave a dagger twist. She jerked, and the air stilled, a tide shifting. Ina had been to the sea once. She'd hated the sand between her toes. She'd loved the salt wind leaving sticky kisses on her skin. She remembered standing in the shallows, watching the waves dash themselves against the shore in a roar of sea foam. She remembered the tug and pull at her ankles, the ineffable desire to let herself be dragged into the depths of the seductive beckoning of those dark fathoms. She felt that familiar pull now, and turned, as did the others, gazes drawn to the alley. The birds fell silent. The wind held its breath. A soul approached, their face obscured. Only a few blue strands of hair escaped at the razor edge of their jaw. They pulled back their hood, and Ina swallowed the tea gone sour on her tongue. Their face, a seismic distortion of fractal patterns. Their skin had been gouged deep, myriad excavations carving to their bone. Their hands were marked as deeply, the right carrying fresh bruises and oozing blisters, nails gummed with old blood. The red raw grooves continued on their wrists, rills disappearing up their arms hidden by the long sleeves of their stained coat. Ina met their gaze, their eyes twin moons, all crater and shadow, irises cracked and sclera webbed with broken capillaries. They should have been old, bent and gnarled beneath the litany of hurt written in their flesh, but they stood straight, lean and vital, despite the extent of their shattering. You look like you could use some tea. Ina poured a second cup, nudging it toward the empty chair beside her. The Shatterling sat, and the wind sighed a weary exhalation. The Luries resumed their chattering, as did the other tea drinkers, turning their backs on Ina and her unexpected companion. I'm Ina, she and her, she said. Sam, he and his voice a kindling crackle the moment before sparks burst into flame. I think you have something of mine. He sipped the tea through chapped lips. The shard gave another twist, and pain pulsed along the winding threads beneath Ina's skin, reaching through the gristle of her body for the soul across the table. Why do you carry the pain of others? Ina asked, gaze flicking to the shards tethered in Sam's hair. Why did you steal mine? He cocked his head in a melancholy chorus. None were hers. I only wanted to keep it safe. Ina dug her fingers into loose skin of her chest, prying the shard free from between her ribs. With the hem of her sleeve, she wiped away the gore before setting the shard on the table, sticky smears marring pristine linen. The shard glowed a reticent blue, the color of Sam's hair, the color of the grief dripping from his eyes. Ina reached across the table and caught his right hand, thumbs pressed to the wounds between taut tendon and delicate bone. The sliver lay whimpering, fading. Sam stared, expression contorted by the shatter map across his cheeks. He removed from the folds of his coat a mallet, his knuckles squeezed pale around its handle. Is that what you do? Ina asked. You smash the shards. Sam nodded. Because you think others are better off without their pain? Ina asked gently, but by the tilt of Sam's head and the tug of his lips, she knew she was wrong. She paused, breathed, studied the warped cartography of the Shatterling's face and damaged hands. You do it because you don't want to be the only broken one, she said, and Sam looked up. You don't think you'll ever be whole, and you don't want to be the only one who never finds their shards. You want to feel, I can't feel. I don't feel anything anymore, Sam said. Oh, that's a lie. He wrenched his hand away, Ina's nails tearing ribbons from his paper-thin skin, and raised the mallet. Don't, Ina said. It won't help. She'd done it too. Every Shatterling probably had, trying to destroy the things that hurt them deepest, but the wounds always remained. I just wanted to stop. How do I make it stop? Sam asked. Ina wrapped her arms around her sagging body, feeling the lead of her age in every bone, feeling the grind and bristle of every shard she'd found and returned to its roost. She felt every shatter space she'd filled, and the one still left gaping. It never stops, she said. Hollow or whole, the pain remains. The shards are blades, but their edges soften and their weight lessens. The emptiness, though. The emptiness has sharp teeth that never dull, teeth that gnaw and eat at you until that is all you are. She reached across the table again, tucked a strand of hair behind his ear and traced the groove etched from temple to jaw, bone leering yellow through the ragged edges. Destroying the shards won't undo the injury that made them, she said softly, and it won't make you feel alone, less alone in this. Sam set down the mallet to cradle the shard in a broken hand. With the other, he opened his shirt. Ina wobbled her chair closer and pried the filthy rags from Sam's trembling fingers. Slowly, she unwrapped his chest, the void in her own throbbing with the longing to be filled. Grief is a storm, she said, as she guided Sam's hand toward the chasm between his ribs. It breaks us, leaves us shattered, but it also remakes us if we let it. I don't want to remember, Sam said. Oh, you'll never forget. I loved him, Sam stammered and choked. He was everything, and then he was gone, and all the light went with him. We can never be who we were before the loss, Ina said, but we can choose who to be in the after. but we'll never be the same. She scratched the name of the daughter she'd pulled dead from her body onto the tablecloth with Sam's blood. You'll always be scarred, but you can learn to love those scars and to remember the strength it took to forge them. Even if they hurt, he asked. Because they hurt. Ina felt the bited sting of the shard once more between their fingers as she pressed their hands to his chest. Sam sucked in a breath, eyes screwed shut, tears flooding the canyons in his cheeks, filling the rills with steaming silver, a shimmering filigree. Ina held him as he wept, his wounds sealing, edges pulling together in puckered seams stitched with shining thread. Ina's own hollows resonated in sympathy, and as she squeezed tighter, she felt herself expand and fill, soaking up the overflow. She kissed Sam's hair, her arthritic fingers tangled in blue curls as she tugged the remaining shards free. They caught like wingnuts, whisked away by the wind to find their rightful mourners. Sam unfurled from her embrace. He held up his hand, studying the fresh patina of silver, replacing scab and bruise. This is me now, he said, opening and closing his fingers, limned and glimmer. But it still hurts. Oh, it always will, Ina said. Sometimes it will be a biting blade, at others a hammer blow. Most days it will be a thrum and ache, and eventually it'll be a tug at stitches and a slow smile. Ina rocked back in her chair and watched Sam leave, a fading iridescence. Ina pressed a hand to the hole in her chest and found it sealed with patchwork silver. She remembered the daughter she'd lost, a tug on the seams of herself, and a slow smile stretched across her lips as she ordered another pot of tea. That was Shatterling.
My. That was beautifully written and utterly riveting and heartbreaking, and yet kind of oddly hopeful too. I love your reading voice too. You can read my work anytime.
Oh, thank you.
So it's our custom here at Story Hour to just pause a moment between the authors and just kind of let the work resonate just a bit. So that's what we're going to do for just a brief moment. Wow. All right. Thank you, Xan. That was Shatterling, Xan van Rooyen. And our next author is Can Wiggins. Before I introduce Can, I'd like y'all to remember, if you're not going to be speaking, and most of you won't except for Can, please just mute your mic so we don't get any extraneous background noise, clicking of glasses and sipping of tea and all that stuff. So, Can Wiggins writes short stories, but also writes longer pieces, all of them dipping into liminal places in which she feels most comfortable. Her work has been compared to Twilight Zone, as she likes to twist and surprise not only readers, but herself. She is reading MeeMee tonight, a flash piece published in 2021 in Georgia Gothic, the HWA Atlanta Chapters Anthology, and a story titled The Nothing Man. You can find her stories in Planet X Publications, Oxygen Man Books, plus she has an upcoming tale of woe and wonder in Walk in a City of Shadows Urban Legendary, due any second now from Alien Sun Press. Can first appeared at Story Hour in July of 2021. So Can, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thanks. Sorry, my mute would not turn off. I had to do a little apologize.
No, it's all good.
Xan, that was beautiful. That was a beautiful story. Mine is nothing like that. We're just going to go balls to the wall. MeeMee. The day MeeMee came to live with us wasn't even day. She showed up after sundown. The caretaker had forgotten the evening bed check, so my grandmother simply slipped out as only she could, a sweet, acquiescent smile, the last thing security saw before she slithered out the exit. It was Halloween, the single most important and powerful day on MeeMee's calendar. Forget every kid's calendar in every neighborhood ever. We opened the door when we heard knuckles hitting the wood. We expected a child in a costume. We got a monster in a meat suit. Hey there, how are you? She laughed and laughed, her lower jaw almost touching her bony rib cage. She had the biggest teeth I'd seen outside of a stable. She slithered in, dragging a bag that didn't belong to her. Taking my chances there's something good inside, she hollered like we were deaf. Maybe we were. Maybe we had been deaf and blind to her and her horror show for so long we couldn't hear or see it. But growing up, we didn't think she was monstrous. We didn't see a horror show. MeeMee was wonderful, beautiful. She could work magic. We loved that, even though Pop warned us repeatedly to not, absolutely not, under any circumstances, tell anyone she could do things. And by things, I mean magic. When I say magic, I don't mean abracadabra. Here's a flower in your hair. Here's a quarter behind your ear. Here's a rabbit under your chair. I mean, drop a piece of silver and stump water under the full moon if you want someone or something to do your bidding. Put a photo of your enemy in your shoe and walk on that face until you've ground that bastard to nothing. We found out the hard way that when MeeMee didn't like a friend, a sweetheart, an acquaintance, they went belly up. We didn't notice because there was always something else waved in front of us that took our minds off the loss. When I say loss, I mean gone, and not even dead, just gone. If you get along with your family, you don't need friends, she insisted. The only family I don't get along with is MeeMee, Pop said. It was a joke, but MeeMee didn't have a sense of humor. The next day, he woke up with a migraine that turned into a stroke. No lasting damage, but he was careful with his jokes after that. So, years stacked up, and when she seemed old enough, frail enough, helpless enough, we stashed MeeMee in an assisted living facility. Mistake. It caught fire that first night. Nobody died, the fire was contained, and because she helped others out, she was lauded by the powers that be. She told everyone she refused having her photo taken because she didn't want the publicity. It's because she doesn't cast a reflection, Mom said. That turned out to be the last coherent thing out of her for a month. I stewed in my room for those 30 days, scales dropping from my eyes along with tears of loss and rage, and started making my own plans. So when she showed up that night, it was a surprise, but I was ready as I ever would be. She did not suspect I had turned my hand to the family business. Yes, I'm the sorcerer's apprentice she should have befriended. But being the baby of the brood, and therefore of no consequence, nobody paid attention to me. This gave me worlds to walk between, and I took that advantage. Magic should be spread so things can grow. Otherwise, you're like a dragon in a fairy tale, keeping all the gold to yourself. Which described MeeMee from her iron gray hair to the soles of her feet, which now sported fading faces from the past, a past that never came up in talks around the dinner table. She grew malignant, bit by bloody bit, like a cancer. Or maybe she had always flown wicked, and we hadn't realized it because we were taught to love what was ours. And it was love that strengthened my resolve. Love for people that were mine, people I bound myself to protect before she devoured them all like gingerbread. When she slinked upstairs to visit my attic bedroom, there were witch jars, beautiful spun glass prisons, and plenty of salt to keep her busy, grain by grain by grain. Not even MeeMee could fight that. And, like MeeMee taught us, sometimes you have to hug people you don't like so you'll know how big to dig the hole in your backyard. When I bent down and embraced her, MeeMee screamed, but nobody heard a thing. That's that. And the next one is The Nothing Man. The Nothing Man by me. Sam started sleeping under his bed again. He hadn't done that in a while. And to be honest, we don't know why he took it up in the first place, let alone a second time. Well, okay, not true. We did know why after all is said and done, but we couldn't bring ourselves to have another frustrating talk with him regarding what's real and what isn't. I had learned that if I told Sam the monster in his closet isn't real, that led to questions about Santa, and then we would go straight on till morning and talk about God, wouldn't we? He's barely 6, but he had already gone existential on my ass. It was tiring, to be honest, and we couldn't be sure he wouldn't discuss it with other kids who would go straight to their parents, who in turn would come straight to us, and we had enough on our plate as it was. He's smart, smarter than most his age, and that's not just me saying it. He was tested per his pediatrician's recommendation. That woman called it. I don't know what led her to suspect he was exceptional. Don't all parents think their kids are a cut above the others? I remember telling her, decisions about schools will be made soon enough. For the time being, we just want Sam to be a kid. But our sweet boy worried. He was born clenching his jaw. We didn't know why, although, to be honest, his mother used social media to keep people up to date on everything horrible going on everywhere at any given second, blocking longtime friends who dared try getting her to laugh or talking her off whatever ledge she perched on like a harpy that particular day. Plus, she told people on a near daily basis that she, and I quote, silently wept with joy, end of quote, doing something that should have been a simple, fun event. Hot dogs at a sit-down counter doesn't strike me as having the potential for an emotional ground zero event, but go figure. Since our boy was already anxious, he proved easy to unhinge. He picked up on things, reacting accordingly. I know you're wondering what's out there for a kid to worry about. Plenty, that's what. It's why we wouldn't allow news on the family room TV. It's above his emotional pay grade, smart as he is. Hell, some of it's above mine. Plagues, wars, and the occasional gun-slinging psychopath shooting up a school, or a church, or a synagogue. We all worry. We're all clenching our jaws. And then a new monster came after him. In response to this, again, Sam took to either sleeping under his bed or creeping into our bedroom in the dead of night, sitting behind a well-stuffed chair lodged in a corner while his mom and I snored away the night, our terrified boy a few feet away from those who should give comfort and stability. But sometimes, as my own dad would have said, you need a little of the old, that's enough, young man, and you've got to trust me here. That didn't work either. The first time I woke up and found him sitting on the floor in our room, I literally said, that's enough, Sam. You got to trust me here. And with that, I walked down the carpeted hallway, my squirming son in my arms, my t-shirt balled up in his fist. Buddy, there's nothing in the house, nothing but us, I told him as he voiced his fears. Just us. Sometimes houses make noises when they cool off and settle at night. And since it's so quiet, that's what you're hearing, baby. You're hearing the house make noises. I kissed the top of Sam's head, thinking he must have had a nightmare or walked in his sleep, confused when he woke up on the floor in another room. He wasn't having any of it. I didn't say he's in the house. He's not in the house. He's outside, Dad. He's in the yard. I saw him. I gave him a once-over in the hall bathroom with a damp, warm face cloth, then held his hand as we walked into what we call the boy cave. I wrapped him up in his favorite t-shirt and shorts and sat by his bed as he calmed down, finally snuggling under the bedclothes. But he came around again when I felt his forehead. "Don't look outside," he warned me. "It can see you." He seemed honestly frightened then, not just a little kid doing what he thought would garner extra attention. "I don't have to look outside, Sam. There's nothing out there, just like there's nothing in here." He turned away, resting on his side, pulling the coverlet over his head. I stayed until his breathing slowed and softened, his limbs no longer twitching. I stayed until he slept. That Saturday, Sam sat at the kitchen table, papers and crayons and markers and colored pencils and whatevers keeping him company. He always revealed his nightmares and fears by drawing them. I thought of this as the kids' version of calling a monster by its name in order to control it. I looked down at his handiwork and saw a person, a man or maybe a boy, the deep blue-black figure suspended against a starry background. Features sunk down into deeper, shadowy markings, circles for eyes, a line for a nose, and a near indiscernible oval where a mouth would be. I felt distinct unease when I looked at the piece, although my mouth had already opened to praise his work. My face froze in a forced smile as I looked at Sam, his solemn expression adding more disquiet. The drawing, rather the figure in the drawing, felt malevolent. There was a fluidity to the figure on the page, as if it had been caught mid-step on the way to greet you, the viewer, as if it had business to attend to, and you were that business. "Who's this?" I asked. "Nothing." "Nothing?" I smiled at him, handing the paper back. "Sure looks like something, or somebody." "That's what he's called," Sam said. "That's what he is. Nothing. The nothing man. If he catches you—" Sam turned the sheet over. "I don't want Mommy seeing it." I pushed a little to make sure I had understood him. "We don't want Mommy to see the nothing man?" I asked. Had I missed something? I turned up a corner of the paper to look it over again. He slapped his hand down on mine, startling us both with his sudden ferocity. I stared at him, wanting to see, wanting to understand what was going on in his head. "Ever," he whispered. That very night, I dreamt I stood outside a lowering sky, clouds approaching from the north, driven by an icy wind. What had been my well-manicured yard stretched out before me, thinning as it made its way to the horizon, narrowing into a long ribbon of blacktop. As I gazed down that road, I saw something walking toward me. It wore the form of a man, but I knew this thing came from the dark itself, the dark of the highway on the earth, and the highway that lifted into the storm-heavy sky, a sky that morphed into a wall. And from that wall, I saw again the figure of what passed for a man, stepping into my world, staring up at me as I now looked down from the second-story safety of my bedroom, peering from its large window, which he now stepped through and into my life, bringing the dark with him. I awoke, confused and thrashing about on a bed that held me prisoner as my breath hitched in my throat, my hands hooked into the drenched sheets as I struggled to re-enter the waking world, ready to fight, terrified for my son. That day, after a colder than usual shower, a closer than usual shave, and a mask that promised I wouldn't look quite so tired, I thought about taking a morning walk. My mind soars during walks, solving problems easily enough and settling whatever mood is beating me up. "Aren't you going to the office?" Shelley asked as I headed for the door. I turned and gave her a big grin. Each of us were lone wolves who had somehow managed to find one another and make a home, complete with kid. We were lucky, and we knew it. She's supportive of my weekend work, and I certainly am happy with it. Extra hours on top of our combined pay keeps us in this house, this community, this lifestyle, these cars, these clothes, these Tony shoes, the occasional night out, memberships to top gyms, yoga studios, museums, wine clubs, not to mention tickets to concerts. I nodded, figuring she needed as much time away from me as I did her sometimes. How about some coffee? Not that I don't love you, honey, she started, and I finished up with my own version of what's love got to do with it. I belted it out as we whirled each other around, Sam giggling at our antics. He's the proverbial spoonful of sugar in our sometimes salty outlook, and I admit, it was good to hear him laugh again. As our impromptu performance wound down, Shelley held me close. Don't go in today, baby. Stay here. Sammy needs you, she whispered. I need you too. I pulled back ever so slightly and smiled down into her sweet face, a face pinched with worry and stress and anxiety 9 times out of 10 now. This, alas, had been her own doing, helped along by her inability to shake, rattle, and roll when life threw a punch. How about a movie? Let's do it, she laughed. We could hear Sam still snickering over our impromptu song and dance as he hovered nearby in the hallway. I think someone is settling down a little, I said. He is. He wasn't in our room last night, she whispered. No? Progress. I'll take it. We grinned at each other, certain we had managed to weather the worst of whatever Sam was going through. He's just been wound so tight since we moved here, she said. Yeah, change is tough for everyone, especially little kids, I said. Even super smart little kids, evidently. And he's always had monsters in his wheelhouse, she reminded me. He has, hasn't he? Yeah, most kids do, she said. I haven't heard anyone else really talk about it. No, well, you need to get out more, because they do. You need to go out with the girls. The gossip is choice. Oh, no, the gossip. I put on a horror-stricken expression. She laughed. Nothing really terrible, but Jill is a little worried about Frankie. He doesn't want her out of his sight. He started talking a few days ago about some boogity he calls the nothing man. And just like that, everything stopped. I mean, everything. I heard my wife, but she sounded as if she spoke through a fan, her voice wavering, watery, breaking up. Frankie drew a picture of him, didn't want her to look at it. She brought it to our lunch yesterday and showed us. Weird, let me tell you, all black on black. She says it's got him really jacked up. I staggered back like I'd been punched, my elbow hitting the coffee cup on the kitchen's island. It hit the floor, breaking into 3 neat pieces. Wow, Shelley gasped. You okay? Stay there, I'll get it, baby. Might be a good thing you're taking the day. The nothing man, I repeated. She nodded. I heard a sound behind me, a gasp. I turned sharply, already knowing what I would see. Sam stood balanced between the hallway and the kitchen, and I felt a chill snake its way down my back. His face blanched, each cheek sporting a hot pink splotch, his mouth open, and his expression slack as he stared at me. Ever, he said, his expression a mix of rage and terror. He turned and ran. What the hell? Shelley gasped. I took off after Sam, who seemed to be running as fast as a kid much older and much bigger. Sammy, Ever, he screamed. Ever, I have to stop it. Come here, baby. Come to me, sweetheart. It's okay, I shouted. What's wrong? What's happened? Shelley cried out. Nothing, I called, but it was obvious. Something had happened. Something was still happening and unfolding in real time, even as time seemed to stand still, darkening outside. I heard her shouting for Sam, then realized she was following us. Sam ran into our room, what Shell called his safe place. But there isn't a safe place. Not really. There are safer places, but no place is truly safe. I know that now that it's too late. I managed to not bowl Sam over as he stopped short in the middle of our bedroom, bare feet planted on the plush carpet, staring as if mesmerized by the wall across from our bed. Shelley entered the room, her expression unreadable. She walked over to stand beside me as I sat at the foot of the bed, facing my son. I didn't want to force him into being held or comforting or anything tender. As smart as Sam is, he would have seen it as babying him, placating him without fixing the problem. Anything to shut him up had been Shelley's mantra. Give him something, give him anything, give him whatever. But I had always met Sam halfway, using reason, not baubles, logic, not toys. Sam, I don't know what's going on, I started. This is scary. It's scaring you, and now it's scaring us. I know there's something going on with you and Frankie and whatever else about this nothing man. We're not going to let anything get you, Sam. Anything or anybody. He's not even real, baby. And that's as far as I got. Sam turned on us before I could draw another breath, form another word. His face was no longer that of a child. His expression a rictus of abject terror. He stared at the two of us, fighting tears. What does the nothing man want, Sammy? Why is he coming for you? Why is he after you? You don't get it. You don't get it. He's not coming for me, Daddy. He's coming for you. He's coming for Mom. Shelley cried out, and I reached for her as Sam turned towards the wall for the last time. Our hands clasped forever. Our sunset watch on the floor in our well-appointed room, in our luxurious, comfortable house, in our secure, gated community, as the nothing man broke the barrier, flooding our world with the dark, and all it brought with it, and all it took away. Thank you.
Damn. Oh, that was great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Laura and I do not consult each other about programming. We prefer to sort of let the chips fall where they may. And tonight, we've had two authors, both fiercely talented with rather different narrative approaches, but really oddly congruent work. A really great October story hour. So thank you both so much for bringing your work to share with us and the folks at home, as they say. So, and both of you, welcome back anytime, please.
Thank you so much.
So that's it for tonight, everybody. Another week, another great story hour. Between this week and next, please take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and come back next week and help us continue to spin the fictive dream, as we like to say. We'll have Elmarie Wood and Gemma Files. I'd like to thank my fabulous co-host, Laura Blackwell, and both of our authors, Xan van Rooyen and Can Wiggins. Good night, everybody.
Good night.